So I think everyone knows who I am, but for the recording, I'll talk just quickly about myself. So my name's Quinn. I'm a science practitioner, what's known as a work psychologist. And so my role and my job is to increase performance and communication inside the workplace, which really comes down to two things, which is job happiness and job performance, which increases profitability ultimately. So Carrie, when you asked me to put this together, I thought about inbox and calendar. And so it'll be probably like many of my other classes that it will include that content, but also take on a psychological approach to the inbox and calendar. So as we kind of go through this, we will look at it from a psychological perspective because so much of thinking impacts how we behave. So this is a Zoom meeting. If you want to go to Zoom, if you're an electronics person and you like to have it up close on your screen, you can also join this Zoom meeting that's on the screen, and you'll have it locally on your screen, and you can take snapshots. I will send out a slide deck after, which is a PDF that contains all the slides. But if you want to capture inline or that kind of thing, feel free to join the Zoom meeting. And I always like to give some credit out to pixabay.com. There are a lot of talented artists that do everything from vector graphics to photography, and they typically offer discounts if you go to like iStock Photo or some of those places. So it's just a wonderful site that I use a lot, but I do like to give credit to the artists. It's a big deal in my book, being a scholar, is to give credit. So backup devices. So to produce a context for everybody, what I want to do is walk through where we're going. So where are we headed and why are we headed there? So we'll do a part one. We're going to do intros and bonding here in a second. And then we'll look at the goals. I'm a big goal person, so I always have goals that I'm trying to push and achieve. It's important. We'll have a strategic section where we talk about kind of the cognitive psychology of executing, and we'll do one illustration today. And then we're going to work on this concept that I came up with called rasping. We'll go through what that means. And we'll enter into part two. We're going to actually look at some of Outlook's software features. And that's really a production of me being in two service businesses over 20 years, using the Outlook product, Microsoft's Outlook product, and all the things that I've developed over the years as I've learned the product and how I use it to make my execution better, like how I shape the tool to make my execution better using its features. That's what we call operationalizing. So in science, we call it operationalizing. That means if I want to measure something like warmth or courage or whatever, I have to figure out how I measure it. So is courage a certain set of behaviors that I can observe and score? That's operationalizing. So it just really means making it very practical as far as how to use the tool. If you're using Gmail or something else, you don't have to tune out because every software has features. If you can learn what those features are and know the features, you can determine what's useful to you. And my guess is that on average, and I find this with myself, I used to try to do a yearly inventory of all the features of all the applications that I used, because a lot of times there's so many feature-rich options just sitting out there, we have no idea. And then you ever come across that little tip and you're thinking, oh my gosh, is this new? And the other person says, no, I've been using it for 5 years. And I think, oh my, well, I've missed out, but I'm gonna get started now. We'll do an application exercise that will allow you to kind of analyze your execution methodology. And by execution, I mean getting things done, not using a guillotine. And then we'll do questions and answers. And I put C because I'm big on comments too. So we'll do questions, answers, comments, just do a little interaction, then we'll close out, and then any post-class networking interaction that we want to do. Any thoughts or comments on that so far? Good to go. Okay, excellent. So why don't we go around the room and we're going to introduce ourselves, and we're going to do that. So make this point to say, we all, in some shape or form, struggle with our execution. Nobody executes perfectly all the time. Even the best executors drop the ball here and there. And they have seasons of life that are a real struggle. Gotta get that working. It is going to drive me nuts. Let me do this. Here we go. So here's some goals or learning objectives today that I hope I can produce for everybody by surveying you. Is understanding the strategy for execution of getting things done based on cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is a study of how the brain works, how we learn, how we remember, how we feel, how the brain operates visually, auditorily, the motor cortex, how we move. So what I'm hoping to do is give you a change in philosophy and give you this mindset of being philosophical, more theory-based in your execution, thinking, how do I think, versus taking a tool and being what I call tool-centric. So if I hand you a software, and that happens a lot because I used to be in that industry, you get handed a software. Well, I always looked at the software to say, does this match how we operate? Versus here's the software, then here's a software program, make sure you follow how it works, even though you might be raising your hand going, but it doesn't do this, and how do I do that? That's really something that I do well, that I want to keep doing. The other part is key characteristics of an effective methodology. And that's just a fancy way of saying, what are the key characteristics? If we each build our own system of execution, what are the key characteristics of that system? What are common key characteristics that make for a quality effective methodology or system for execution? We'll talk about leveraging rasping, kind of using that to kind of mentally shape how we think and execute. I want to increase awareness of MS Outlook features tied to rasping. So we'll incorporate what that looks like on a practical level. And then it'll help you, hopefully, we've got a form, a worksheet we're going to go through. We're going to assess our current methodologies for motivation to improve execution and control. So it's going to give you a way to kind of qualitatively analyze, how am I executing? And kind of look at what I do and say, well, do I do these things, or does my system have these things? Does the software I use have these things? And that will be important in moving forward. And then I'm hoping, and I say this in all love as a psychologist, I'm hoping that we leave here just ruthless in our execution. And by that, I mean intense. Like that when we think about execution and getting things done, we leave here serious about execution. Like we take it seriously with an intensity. I had a friend that talked about being so serious, like that feeling, and I think he watched some kind of video, but he's an intense person, and his thing was like, I try to execute with the urgency that I'm being held underwater. And that's my intensity, is that I need air, and that's how hard I play. Now, we want to rest, and we want to do those things. So it is important to get rest. We don't want to burn ourselves out. That leads to all kinds of bad problems. There's no more bodies, Murray. No more bodies. And I don't have anything incorporated for bodies in here. That's another class. It's forensics down the hall. I come to this every time I approach any kind of material or anything. Kind of this idea of why are we doing this and what are we really talking about? So just kind of interactively, what do we all think we're really talking about here? When we talk about inbox and calendar, what are we really talking about?
Well, we're organizing just our schedule, our communication.
Communication. Yes. So there's a social aspect to it. Information.
Calendar would be priorities.
Calendar for priorities. Okay. Yep. So setting priority. What else? Anybody else?
Staying on task.
Staying on task. Nice. It's good too. That ties right into today. Yep. How do you feel about your calendar inbox? What are your feelings tell you about it? Maybe it changes day to day. Do you feel overwhelmed? Does it bring you joy?
It's full of so much junk.
It's useless.
Yeah.
Some of it's useless. Like why? We'll talk about that too. I've got a tip and trick for that. So when we get down to it, I think we're talking about performance. So when we look at any tool, we look at like a thing like calendar or inbox, I think we're really talking about how do we execute. We're talking about a tool that either helps us perform, helps us execute and get things done, or it doesn't, right? Some tools impede us from getting things done. And we just mentioned that. There's a lot of useless garbage in there. And if I'm spending my time looking at it, I'm wasting my time, right? Others are buying my time, and not necessarily bad. What they have to say is probably important to them, right? And I have things I send out, they probably look at it and go, there's the Quinn guy again. Boy, that's cluttering up my box. So when we think of performance, I think that's what we're really talking about when we talk about inbox and calendar. So I think strategically, we position ourselves around this idea of performance and the tool and what we're doing with the tool. So performance is really behavior. I mean, we hear this a lot in the workplace: job performance, work performance, key performance indicators, performance measures, all this kind of stuff. If we break it down in its simplistic form, we standardize it, performance is behavior. We are always performing all the time, whether we realize it or not. If I'm sitting still when I need to be executing, I'm performing. I'm just not performing against what I need to be doing, right? If I'm up here and I'm dancing, it's kind of like this. I'm always dancing. There's always music going. I'm always performing, right? So I'm always behaving. We're always performing. But it's the outcome we notice. Does that make sense? Like when we have a performance review, we say, Quinn, your performance is poor, right? Well, that's not my performance. That's my performance score. I already performed before I got to the score, right? So performance is the thing that we do. It's the outcome we notice. And I like to use these examples. I failed to show up for work for 1 week. At the same time, I never check in. Hey, Brett, I'm gonna be a little late today. I had an emergency flat tire. I don't check in, right? I just kind of go about my way for several days. Well, the outcome, the results of my performance are, I get invited to seek other team opportunities, which is a nice way of saying I'm invited to leave. I study how to play marbles effectively for 2 years while practicing daily. So I'm flicking these marbles. That's my performance, and the outcome is I become an expert and I get my name in the Guinness Book of World Records as the master marbler. So if we think this way, the way we behave is really what produces the outcome. That's really our performance, not the score. So behavior is a product of thought, and this is a key psychological thing. The way we think and feel produces how we behave, whether we realize it or not. Now, I can automatically react to a situation strongly. That's called a trigger. A lot of times we don't even know our triggers. It's because of past events and things and emotions, but our brains created a program for that and said, hey, here's how we respond to that. We don't like it, right? You poke me, I'll poke you, or that kind of thing. Or, hey, you hug me, I'll hug you. Or this is a great environment, or this is not a good environment. We have those programs already built. But what we focus on affects what we behave toward. You know, when you first learned to drive, do you remember that? I know for me, it's been a long time. When you first learn to drive and you look into the oncoming lane, what starts to happen? You start to drift into the lane. It's the same way psychologically with what we behave toward. We start thinking on it, we behave toward it. What we focus on consistently or think on is our focus. So whatever I think on continually is my focus, right? It's what I'm enamored with, what I'm dead set on. If I'm running a marathon, it's maybe getting to the finish line or making the halfway mark. That's focus. So behavior is a product of thinking. And so we want to control what we focus on. And consistent behavior, this is the key, execution. Consistent behavior over time is performance. It's effort in a direction. If I say I'm going to accomplish X, I behave in that way on a daily basis over time to accomplish X. That means that I focus on it, think on it. And performance, remember, results in measurable outcomes. If I shoot 1 marble a day, I have a certain skill level. If I go out, I've heard that golf pros will hit thousands of balls in a day. If I go out and I flick 1,000 marbles in a day, I'm going to get pretty good. My outcome is going to be Guinness Book of World Records if I work it right. So that's the key, is we want to perform in the direction we want to go, and we want to do it consistently. Cannot see this up close, so I'll walk you through it. This is really just a fancy diagram. It talks about salience. Does anybody know what salience is? We talked about it a little bit in the last class. It's top of mind. So if I say something's salient for me, then it means it's top of mind, right? When you wake up in the morning, you have a certain mental geography and capacity. Certain things are going to occupy your mind, some by deliberation and some not by choice, some just by happenstance. So there's kind of three things that I see in daily life, especially in work. There's philosophical or strategic goals in here, and I'm calling these behavioral drivers. Like, these are things that drive our behavior, right? So there's philosophical and strategy things. These are the things, Murray probably knows it very well, these are the things that business owners don't get to, or leaders don't get to. I had this dream, I was gonna increase profitability 10x in 2 years. It's been 2 years, right? That's strategy, that's the long-term stuff. Like, I'm going from A to Z. There's daily operations, right? I think about there was an old, I think it was a FedEx commercial that I really liked. And there's a guy sitting at a table, he's taking these calls and he keeps saying, yes, ma'am, we can do that. Yes, sir, we can do that. We'll get right on that. Ship that tomorrow, 500, no problem. Hangs up the phone, there's this silence and says, how are we going to do that? That's kind of daily operations, right? It's this stuff that comes up and you just have to get it done. And then there's the unplanned and uncontrollable, right? Car accidents, flat tires, trips to the emergency room, stuff like that. There's things that are just not controllable. All those things buy part of our salience or our mental capacity. They're going to take up a certain amount of it. And what's going to happen, because what we think on, we behave toward. And so when those things enter in, they're going to take a certain amount of our effort. And then we make decisions. So time and effort spent results in the outcomes of those three areas up above. Are we getting things done long-term? What's eating us daily operations, and what's unplanned? So all those things play into where we go. Now, this can be simplified like this. A daily discipline of salience should have some of these things. So we want to prime and frame ourselves, and we need to do it regularly. Now, I'm not going to say you have to do a specific time of day, but priming and framing. Priming has an emotional aspect to it, right? It's where I wake up maybe in the morning, I'm like, hey, I'm going to happen to this day. I've got X things on my list, and I plan to produce those.
Like you said, that's the day is going to happen.
Yeah.
The day's going to make me force my schedule. I'm going to be the one driving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is a really good point, and you mentioned it, Betty, is if you have a tabula rasa, a blank slate, if I wake up to the world and I'm like, here I am, everybody's going to get a piece of me. It's like I've said, I'm a goldfish in a piranha bowl. Party's on, right? What happens is that other people, and I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying we shouldn't self-sacrifice, we should, but intentionally. But eventually what happens is everybody eats a piece of you, there's none of you left. And there's none of what you dreamed and hoped for at the end of the day. And so we want to prime and frame ourselves. So we want to frame ourselves around where are we going and what are our objectives? And we want to produce in ourselves positive emotions about that. Get excited. Remember what your vision was. Even if it's something little. If I'm going to make a garden in my backyard, right? I think about that. My wife has one. If I'm going to make a garden in the backyard, I think about what the plants look like. I think about what it's going to look like when it's mature. I might envision feeling the soil in my hands, and the feel of sun on me, and the smell and the sound of water hitting the garden. So we want to prime ourselves emotionally and frame ourselves. Framing will cause priming. So it's called a cognitive appraisal. So the way we think about things, positive or negative, it will prime us. That affects our emotions. It also impacts our chemicals in our body. And then we want to create real-time awareness. So are we being aware while we're executing during our day? Are we aware what's going on? If I'm a blank slate, I don't have anything I'm aiming towards, so I'm really probably not aware, right? But if I have those three things, and I'm saying those three things take an hour and a half, so I've got a certain amount of time, and stuff's going on in daily operations and unplanned stuff, and I'm going, it's cutting into my time, right? I'm in threat of not achieving that objective. So we need to be aware of that. Our system needs to make us aware. We need to be able to make inline adjustments. What I mean by that is, we see we're not going to reach an objective, we make an accommodation to figure that out. So let's say I have an objective for the week, and one day I just can't get to it. It's just not humanly possible based on circumstances. I'm making an adjustment so that I can execute that later, right? My wife used to get frustrated with me of this, and she might still if she listened to this, but she would say, when I ask for something, then you always position something somewhere else. And for me, it's like Legos. because I'm like, I committed to that. So that Lego moved over here, and I moved the Lego that was there over here. Maybe I shrunk this one a little bit because I can produce more effort, and I expanded this one. But that's the key too, is not letting your objectives go. Now, sometimes you don't want what you wanted anymore, and that's okay. Be willing to let go of it. And then we want to go through this process where we actually self-debrief. So this is hard work. The reason most people don't do this is it takes a lot of discipline. When you get to the end of a day or a week, to sit down and say, what did I do well and what didn't I do? And what went wrong? To actually set aside the time for yourself to analyze how you're executing is really important. And then to make strategic adjustments or make adjustments that will make a positive impact and make the process easier. And then you know what you do with all that? You go to your software application, you go to your tools, and you say, how does this affect how I use the tools? What changes do I need to make in the way that I use the tools to adapt to my circumstances and to the way that I think? Are there any questions or comments on that? Does it make sense?
Daily activity that one is not.
Yeah, and my confession execution was daily basis, really good with the 2 weeks, 3 months out. If I look 5 years out, I'm not priming and framing myself for 5 years out. I'm not really asking myself, and it makes a huge difference. I'm not really asking myself, what does it look like 5 years from now? I should be, because here's the difference. Imagine you walked into a room, let's say you want to be whatever, and you walk into a room and you think to yourself, I'm me right now. You're going to behave a certain way. If you walk in that room and you say, I'm me right now, but I'm also headed there, and how would that person there behave right now? It makes a little difference in the way that you behave. And it's small adjustments over time that have big, big effects. It's like in math with angles. Down here at the triangle, that's pretty close. But we go on and on and on and on and on, and pretty soon it takes me forever to hike that other part of the triangle to get to where the other line was headed. So that's how that goes.
A question for you.
Yes, sir.
So I can see priming and framing happening at the beginning of the day, helping me establish this is what I'm going to do today. So that the Quran is the day of this week. Do you have any personal triggers or practices that you use for the rest of those, the real-time awareness, different adjustments? Anything you do to help yourself and say, yeah, it's time to think about awareness and adjustments?
I do, and I'll show you in a minute too. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But absolutely, I call it, and I'll spoil it right now. We'll get into it a little bit. I call it bookends, is what I call it. So if you have a shelf of books and you got a book in, it's holding it up. I book in the front of my day, and I book in the back of my day. I book in my weeks, and then once a year, I book in my year. So I take one day a year, and I get by myself, and I look at all my goals, and I reflect on the year, and I reflect on everything from work life to personal life to everything. And I say to myself, and sometimes really painful, I say, how did I do? And sometimes I look at this and I go, boy, I totally forgot that I put that down, which again is my confession execution. I need to be doing that. So the key is setting those disciplines. And the way that I do that is a calendar. I'll show you here in a little bit. That keeps me very aware visually of what's happening. Does that help?
Slides.
So if we think about variables, this is how scientists think, right? What are the variables involved in this? If we think about the variables of execution, getting it done, I've tried to come up with the base elements. And I think they're this. I think they're effort, so that's behavior, right? I think it's the tools, equipment, materials that we use, resources, money, software, whatever it is. Those are the tools that we use to get things done. This is a big one, knowledge. Sometimes people knock knowledge here and there, right? Oh, I've heard it, or I don't need to know that. Here's been my experience. The more and more that I become more and more of a scholar, I realize all that knowledge, what it does is it helps you to move faster in time. It helps you to apply less effort for more impact because you know more. You know what to avoid. You know what's most likely to produce an outcome. So gaining knowledge is also key. Now, I highlight the green here, time. I think this is the most overlooked variable in execution. People have to-do lists, not knocking to-do lists. What's the problem with the to-do list? It gives you a due date. It might give you a start date. But a lot of times it doesn't give you how much time and effort's required, right? It gives you this big gap of time. But do you know on a daily basis how much effort will be required? Now you might if you use like Microsoft Project or something like that that has all the tasks broken out over time. But the big problem with it is I use to-do lists, but I use them for like home repair. Or I use it for something that comes into my head and I say, you know what, I would like to do that maybe eventually, not now. I'm at my capacity. I put it on a list. Later on, I can go get that item and I can put it on a calendar or something and I can plan it out. But then I don't lose it, right? I'm able to stick with it. So I think whatever methodology you use to execute, it has to have time in it. It has to be something that can capture and show time. Otherwise, it doesn't help. Do you ever get to the point where there's a project deadline or something and then you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? I have been there. Problem is, I know how I got there. Because I'm like, you didn't execute on that. It's on your list right there on the calendar. You didn't execute that day, and you didn't execute that day, and you didn't execute this day, and this is how you're here. This is how you got here. Questions or thoughts on that? Time is your one constant. Remember that. Time is your one constant. You can adjust your effort. You can modify your tools. All those other things you have some control over. But time, it will go, it's ruthless. It will go on without you. It doesn't care. It will just keep moving, right? It's the one resource we're spending, and we have to execute on it appropriately. So to help with this, I came up with this idea. I was trying to think of what's an acronym that I could put these things into that I do that would be helpful and let people easily remember. So I came up with this idea of RASP. And I forgot to bring it. I'll bring it tomorrow. I forgot to bring a file in. You know, sometimes I sharpen my lawnmower blades with this file. And so I forgot to bring it in. But to rasp something is to make it smooth, to scrape it, to make it smoother, right? It's a file or a similar metal tool with a roughened surface for scraping and filing or rubbing down objects of metal, wood, or other hard material. When you're working on your system of execution, you're making it smoother. You're making it flow. I love that about race cars, right? It's always about what can we do? How can we reduce, our pull of gravity? How can we reduce the drag over the car? What's our fuel mix? What do our tires look like, right? We're always pressing the envelope to get better. That's the way I view execution. So I came up with this acronym of rasping. So it looks like this: refining, automating, standardizing, and planning. And I know there's like Six Sigma, there's a lot more complex systems. What I find with complexity and what cognitive psychology would show is, if we get too complex, we'll never execute it. I can look at it and be like, that's a great rocket. Okay, go build it, Quinn. If I forgot.
How about a rubber band?
How about a rubber band? I'll put a stuffed animal on it and let's test it and see how it works. So each one of these, I put together a special definition, but these are 4 aspects of execution. So if we look at refining, it's increasing efficiency and speed of execution, how fast we get something done, by doing these things. Being aware of the task count. So if you have a process, how many tasks are involved in the process to get it done? Does it take me 40 or does it take me 50? Can I reduce the count of the task? The task order. In what order do I do things? Do you think about this in your life during the day? Do I do better in the morning or do I do better in the evening? Is my most creative time during lunch? Those kinds of things. So knowing the rhythm of your life and figuring out when you do things. When's the best time that you're executing things? And it's the same way with task order. If I'm doing a certain number of things, like when I mow, I know I have lawn on the brain today. Maybe it's because summer's over and I'm ready to stop watering my lawn. If I can mow first and then I can trim, it's not my method. I've just found it's not efficient because I then have grass clippings everywhere and I'm fighting the yard. I might have to go back over it. So I always trim first and mow second. It's that kind of thing. Are there things you're doing that you can change the order of? It's the task frequency. How often do I do this task, right? Do I need to do it more or less? And it's the task method. How do I do the task? How am I doing something efficiently, right? I used to do a lot of Taekwondo, right? So we would do things like this. If you swing like this, it's so slow. And back when I was in my prime, I could probably strike someone 3 times before they could hit me that way. So it was straight, direct on, right? It's the same way when we execute. Am I doing things I don't need to do? And here's an example. If I record information in multiple places, do I really need it in multiple places? Am I overdoing it, right? When I could record in one place and have it automatically shared, that kind of thing. Any questions on refining? Yes. Automation. This is one of my favorites with technology. So automate, using technology to automatically perform a task regularly or in a response to a precursory event. So we use the technology to say, when X happens, do Y. And I can be sound asleep, dreaming of my class at the chamber, right? And something happens with my email and it kicks off and it just does its job. Okay? That's automating. So I can tell it to do something in response to something, or I can tell it to do it regularly. Windows updates are a great example of that. Hey, update my computer every day or every month or whatever. That's automating. Standardizing. This is another good one. Creating, and Murray, I think about you because you do this a lot in the plants. Creating procedures and processes to be executed identically in every instance, right? And certainly they can change based on the instances changing, but it's creating this rhythm of doing it the same way, having something to follow, and the discipline to follow. It's using templates. And I like to call this pay once, benefit many times. You ever done something over and over? You're like, I really ought to do something about this. I keep doing this from end to end. Maybe it's a project. Seems like all my projects go the same way, yet I'm doing them front to back the whole time over again. It's kind of wasted effort. I could do part of it once, have it ready in a template, and then I'm already standing on the foundation of work I've done prior, and that work is buying me more impact with less effort in less time. So standardizing the way we do things.
Gary, Brett, I don't know if you found in your role with the chamber that you tend to do some of the same things over and over again. For example, when people apply to the chamber, they express their interest. One thing that I've done in the past that helped me with customer inquiries was I had typed out a response so many times I thought, why don't I just save this as a boilerplate and a template? And so when I get that kind of inquiry, I go to my folder, I copy that text and pop it in and I send it. I don't have to retype it. So that was just an example that I've used in my own life to standardize on in communications.
Okay, I keep it in my drafts, but and then copy it in, so I use that draft and slide.
Right.
But,
Yes,
yeah. But
copy and paste it. I wish texting had that, where we can have a menu of.
I think there are some apps that will do it. I used to have like an autoresponder app. I think there's some apps that will do it. You can create canned responses.
Yeah, I don't have that on text.
Yeah.
But besides the I'm busy or I can't talk right now, I would
Yeah.
love to have more options on text.
Yep.
But I do have emails that are already written and just saved on my desktop, and I just confirm, copy and paste it. And they're saved like on PDF, so I can't move them. You know?
Yeah. No, it's a really good example.
Because that way, otherwise you do
That's-
this, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of standard or, you know, like there's like,
Yeah.
I'm not ready for this.
Yep.
And then you can go to the class, you're doing the class, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yeah. Pay once, benefit many times.
Mhm.
That's the key. Like you just get more return on your effort. So planning, predicting and recording required future actions, plus, this is the big part, a lot of people record future actions. Here's my goals. I'm going to do X. I'm going to do whatever it is, right? I'm going to do X. But the key is to include the corresponding effort and pace based on time available to create outcomes. That's key, is being able to plan how much effort at what times you have to execute to get something done. That's how we end up where we're like, this project's due tomorrow, and here I am. Right? Because we didn't really plan the effort and pace. We planned a time frame, but we didn't really allocate the time to execute or produce effort.
Over the squirrel.
Squirrel, yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So that's rasping. Any thoughts or questions on that? Right? Yes. I thought to myself the other day, when it comes to looking at your long-term, your distal goals, you are grasping, and you should be rasping. So if we look at this from a cognitive psychology perspective, what I want to do is say, hey, let's take psychology and let's apply it to our technology and the way we behave. So in psychology, if you look at auditory functions, they're a serial function. In technology, what serial means is one after another. So if you send me a message, Betty, of 1 through 6, I stand here and I go, I'm ready. You send it and I go, 1, 2, 3, right? That's serial. That's a serial, that's ingesting information serially. And what research will show is we can remember a certain amount of serial things. There's what's called digital input, which is visual. You know, you hear that saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. That's digital input. It's everything all at once. Think of it like side by side. If you say, I'm going to tell you 1 through 6, and then you throw all of them at me, I go, boom, 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 all at once, 1 through 6. That's visual. So that's digital. So we want to kind of think that way with our technology, right? Am I taking this in serially or digitally, right? And when is it good to do one or the other? There are, and I'll make an example later, there are times when it makes sense. Serial is low bandwidth. So if we had if we had Mike Wise in here, Clockwork Networks, low bandwidth. It's a little pipe. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Digitally is high bandwidth. It's like I can look at something and see it all at once, and it gives me instant meaning, versus I don't have to pick up pieces of information and then put a context around it. So this is slow and tedious, not for a computer though. So you can make your computer do serial things very quickly. But human-wise, serial ingestion is slow. It's really slow. I think of those people in eating contests and they don't chew, it's gone.
Well, that's weird.
I know, I'm on a weird tangent today. And then so rapid access, right? Right, bodies, hot dog, what are we doing here? Lawns. Rapid access is digital, so it's quick access. This is a long time to context or to develop meaning, right? This is why conversations can be more tedious. It takes a while to get to the context. If you have your people who are like, hey, just give me the bottom line, they're saying, just give me the context. I'm struggling. I don't want to go through the serial process. The digital is a quick visual, short time to context, instant meaning. Got it. You look at, we were talking about the art fest, you look at a piece of art, you have an instant feel based on the whole piece of art. It's not like you come up and you're like, this little area, I'm gonna go from the top left corner, across, and down. And everyone over here is like, it's an elephant. Like, no, I'm not sure. Yeah, it looks like an elephant. Okay. Right. That's the difference between those two. Any thoughts or questions on that part of cognitive psychology, like how we take in information? So here's the part 2. This is software features and tips. And this is why I'm going to send out the slide deck. I tried to put all the icons beside each thing that I do inside Outlook that is part of this refining, automating, standardizing, and planning. These are all functions that are shaping the tool versus the tool shaping me. So I'll go over, my plan is to demonstrate some of these to you, but I'll talk through each one of them real quick, and then I'll demonstrate some of them for you. So we talked about 5,000 items in an inbox. We won't say names, Carrie, but we will clarify that it's in her personal mailbox, not her work mailbox. So when we think about an inbox with that many items, a great indication is if you look at your inbox and you say, if I were to address these, how long would it take me? How long would it take to address 19,000 items with quality? Probably a while, even if you're quick. Junk, 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 junk. Oh, I should read that one, reply. Junk, junk, junk. That will take a long time. That's a serial operation. So I try to treat the inbox like an airport versus an extended stay. The inbox is really like a transit station. Plane comes in, I look at the plane, I'm like, oh, it's a fighter jet. Here you go, off to the aircraft carrier. Plane comes in, oh, it's passengers, enjoy Alaska, right? That kind of thing. It goes somewhere, it has a purpose, it gets classified or put into folders, right? That makes sense. Now, I say, make your folders operate for you based on your job role, how you think, and your industry, what industry you're in, organize folders in your mailbox so that you can structure them. Now, Brett, you mentioned not letting go of things. When I was in IT, my philosophy was, if you don't want to let go of it, you shouldn't have to. We've come so far that, maybe Mike's probably gonna kill me. Maybe after like 3 years, you archive it off to a file that you could get to, might take a little longer, but you'd still have it. And maybe it's not affecting immediate performance. But my theory is if you think you may want it in the future, just make sure it's organized. It's okay to keep it. Just make sure it's not impeding the transit station, right? So the inbox in my mind is not an extended stay. It is purely a filtering mechanism to sort things. It's where new things land. Now, I'll let something sit in my inbox for a little bit. Like, let's say I'm going to execute on it, and I'm like, boy, I'm so in a rush right now, I don't know where I'm going to put that, right? But later on, I'll go back to it on a daily basis and go, okay, now I got to get this put place somewhere. But my goal typically by the end of the day is to have my inbox empty. And I stop. This is a key. If it's after 6 and something lands, I look at it and go, I really want to look at that, but I know it could wait till tomorrow. And it's okay. There's some planes on the ground for maintenance, and tomorrow I'll make sure they get in the air. So, and then we talked this already, but folder structures, create folders, file things. You can always go back and get them, but at least when you look at something, you're not looking at 19,000. Carrie, I won't keep saying that number, but you're not looking at thousands of emails, if that makes sense. You're not looking at something that's serial and massive. And I don't care how good you are, that many items in an inbox, thousands, something's gonna get lost. It's just gonna get lost, right? You can still search it digitally, it's gonna get lost. Use Outlook templates. So we talked about doing drafts.
Yes.
You can save Outlook templates. The beautiful part about templates is, whether it's Word or Excel, and I have one I'll demo here in a bit. I'm gonna rush and try to get through all the stuff. You can open the template, you type in it, you send it. Doesn't do anything to the original template. It still sits there. So you don't have to copy it or paste it or any of that. You just create a template, open it up, execute on it, kick it out of your inbox with the sent items. In the calendar, there's a next 7 days feature, which is really nice. When you're planning and working with how much time to execute on this, you can click a little icon, it's under the home, and it's the next 7 days. So you can let bygones be bygones out here, and you say, oh, well, I'm right here. I know it's Wednesday, and I'd like to think that that's all great out there, Monday through Tuesday, but it's over. I'm letting it go, but I really am looking at next Monday through Tuesday. So you can do next 7 days. Open a new window. This is by far the most, it is like the coup d'etat to me of Outlook. It allows you to work side by side, and not just in inbox, but calendar to calendar. And that's one of my favorite things, is I can literally have 1 week and the next week side by side, and I can take an appointment and drag it over to the other calendar, and I can look at them and know what I'm pulling, versus going into an appointment, opening it, setting the next date, closing it. So this is a big thing. If you learn how to use this well, it will really help you. There's drag mail to appointment. So if you have your inbox open and you've got your calendar open, you grab the email, right? You left click on it and you drag it over to where you want it on the calendar. And it will create an appointment. And you can change the title or do whatever you want to do with it. But it's a way of taking the plane that just landed and saying, fantastic, you're going to take off Thursday at 7 a.m. Whoop, here you go. Here's your flight plan. It's just a quick way to do it. It's just drag it over. Now, you can also do this. I love to do this for meetings and things. You can drag a mail or another attachment into your calendar appointment. So sometimes I want to prime myself and frame myself for a meeting. I drag the email and all associated attachments into that calendar. I can show up half an hour early. I open all the attachments in the email. I read everything, and then I'm thinking systematically. When I sit down, I'm ready to execute. So you can do that too. So if you get a piece of information or you want to drag something over, just drag it into your appointment so it's ready. Delayed send. Who knows about this? Okay. So delayed send is you go to send it, you want to send an email. This is fantastic for those who are more of us who are more OCD. You know, the people are like, no, let's talk about it right now. Well, I was going to talk about it tomorrow. No, now. Let's talk about it now. What this does for you is, let's say you want to get something out and it's bothering you. You go ahead and you compose it, you attach it, You send it, but you put a delay on it. Sits in your outbox, and as long as your computer has connection to the internet, it will kick out right when you've told it to kick out. I sometimes do this after client meetings. I will do an email, I prep it, I delay it, and I leave it sit there. And I know that it's going to go out when I want it to go out. It could be weeks from now. I've done that, where I've had an appointment that's weeks from then. I'm like, I want to remind them 2 weeks from now, one day ahead. I send them a reminder and I set it to go, and it just goes. Now, you will get a little reminder when you go to close Outlook that there's something still in your outbox. If you can tolerate that, you'll get the benefit of doing that. Use symbolism. We're going to look at this in a mock calendar I set up. Symbolism is just, language is symbolism, but use things like colors, abbreviations, things like that, that quickly tell you pieces of information about something so that you can use it. The military does a phenomenal job of this. You know, get the 4292 over to the whatever stat, you know, that kind of thing. Emergency medical people do it. They've got all these abbreviations and things. It makes for rapid communication and meaning. And you can do this with keystrokes. Use your Outlook status for your appointments. So you're really looking at appointments and going, what kind of appointment is that? On what level is it? I was supposed to meet with Murray. I was planning on practicing marbles. Maybe my marble appointment has some kind of note or meaning that's like, it's not as important. I probably ought to meet with Murray instead of playing marbles. Use out of office. It's more than vacation. I like to call it, as a psychologist, I call it the aware and care feature. So if I'm working really hard on something and I got to be heads down, I'm going to use that out of office. It just lets me say, Betty, I got your message. I'm heads down right now working on something. I will get back to you. I care though. Know that I'm out here. It's a great thing, especially in our day and age where there's so much noise. It's really difficult a lot of times to focus and get things done. Speaking of noise, do the work to unsubscribe. If you get an email over and over again and it means nothing to you, get rid of it. Unsubscribe. Get that noise out of your life. Do it yourself or talk to your IT people. They can block it at the cloud level. You can say, I never want to get that ever again. Block it for me. And depending on what it is, most of the times, they can block it at a cloud level so that it never comes in and you're not wasting your time. Use Outlook rules. Anybody used Outlook rules before? A little bit. Does lots of stuff. So you can go to any email, right click on it, do rule. We'll look at as much of this as we can. And you can make a rule. I can have a rule that says when Carrie sends me an email, right? I want you to copy it to her folder and I want you to forward it to all my email addresses because it's that important. I want it to just scream everywhere. So you do things like that. You can do all kinds of actions like filing, deleting, all kinds of stuff like that. There's lots of different rules in there that you can custom design based on their templates. Use recurring appointments if you haven't done that. So recurring appointment is you make an appointment and it just recurs as long as you want it to. I call that set it and forget it. It's just an easy way to say, hey, on a regular basis, over time, I've always got to execute for this long on whatever frequency. Is it daily? Is it weekly? Now, when I do recurring appointments, even if it's going to be for a week and I'm going to do the same thing every day, like let's say I was at a conference and I'm going to attend every day, I just set the one appointment each day, if that makes sense. And it's because of how I operate, and I'll show you. I don't like to have, if there's a weekly appointment that spans days, but it's the same thing, I create 2 recurring appointments. So if it's a Monday and Tuesday, there's a Monday recurring and a Tuesday recurring. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute psychologically is why I do that. Talk it versus type it. So you've heard of like Windows speech recognition. We do it a lot with texting. There's Dragon. I use Dragon naturally speaking. I get to times where I'm tired, like motor cortex wise, I'm just like, I don't got it. Like I can't sit here and type this, but I can sure walk around my office and talk it. So sometimes talking it's faster, right? Hear it versus read it. So sometimes that serial input makes sense. You're in the car, you want to listen to emails, make use of the time as long as you can concentrate. You might want to listen to it. Now, I like to do this. If I'm sending out a proposal or something, I do both. I put it on the screen and I let Word read it to me while I read it and I hear it. And it's amazing what flushes out. I'll have things where I'm like, that sounds goofy. Looks good type, but boy, when you read it, it's goofy. So I'm going to change the wording on that. Make sure short-term memory your ally instead of your nightmare. I did this several times in my prior life. You ever walk away, you've done an estimate or you took notes on something in a meeting, and then like the next day or 3 days later, you're like, boy, I really need to get this done. And then you look at your notes and you think, I have no idea what I was trying to get at. Yeah. And it's like, and now I've got this awkward situation.
I have a question on that. When I go to the networking events, I get a ton of business cards. How do I keep track of doing all those cards?
Here, I can tell you what I do. Hopefully I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. More is better, right? Plentiful mindset. I take the card. I use a program called Office Lens on my phone. I take a picture of it. That allows me to automatically save it as a contact. I open it up, and anybody listening to this who I've reached out to, including people in this room, doesn't mean I love you less. I have a template. I plug in your name. I say it was so wonderful to meet you in the event. And then I got a little bracket that says some special circumstance or something we talked about that makes you know that I care about you personally. I type that in there, and then I send it out. And that's what I do with it. And then the very next thing I do is I go to LinkedIn and Alignable, and I reach out and connect with you on LinkedIn and Alignable. And then I know you've got some visibility to me moving forward. I stay salient in your mind.
Okay, so what's that app called?
It's called Office Lens.
Office Lens.
Yeah, and there are others. There are others if you like that. I'm kind of an Office guy, so I use that, and it's part of the Office suite.
And you take a picture of it.
I take a picture of it, and then I can save it, and it will save as a contact.
Now, do you do that at the event?
No. So
how
at
do
the
you
event,
keep track of what you're supposed to do with these people? Like for me, I have like, I want to sign up for RFES, or I need to talk to Brett, or
yeah,
I want to know. So I've got like 6, I come back with a stack of business cards, but I don't know what to do with, I can't, so the last follow that I went to, I got back, I think I had some pretty good data, I couldn't remember what I was doing. And
that will have an impact. I didn't include that in here, but will have an impact.
And so I just need to know how to buy at the event. I like that you have a LinkedIn, and then to LinkedIn, and what other sites you connect with them?
Alignable. Yep.
Okay.
Marie introduced me to
Should
Alignable.
we
It's a lot of fun.
Should I be Alignable?
I like it. Murray, what's your opinion of it?
So that it's more
My last business wasn't Alignable. We got nothing out of it, but I can see the value.
Can be more locally focused than.
Than LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Do we need to, Brett, ask me for permission for that?
But you can use tools like that. You might want to share it with her in case it's good. She sees it as useful.
I will just ask, because especially in working with the chamber, I mean, I think there's not a problem on LinkedIn. I think that's more me, but I think the line will be one chamber, right?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's been giving me analytics. Like with something, it said I had 32,000 exposures.
Yeah.
So,
I know it's more geared towards community and towards your local network. And
I like the forums because I think there's forums where you can have peers and you don't have to feel the pressure of buying or selling. And people can be more vulnerable there. They can throw things out like, I have a question about marketing. I have a question about this. And then, other leaders and owners will chime in and say, this has been my experience. So, and when I say make short-term memory your friend, use those recurring appointments to capture notes and already have the appointment ready for you to execute. So if you're doing something, take those notes in an appointment that's already in the future that you've prepared before the meeting, put the notes in and then save it. And then it's just sitting there waiting for you to execute against. And what I'm working toward is being as efficient as I've been in the past. Having a meeting and having a post-execution meeting right after it. Everybody says, bye. And I say, oh, this is really hard, but I got to be disciplined. I'm going to sit here and do this right now. That's what I call making short-term memory your friend. You're going to spend half the effort on it as you would the next week if you've already allotted time to execute right away.
So you're saying this is the note build that you're using?
And I put OneNote in here. You can tie in OneNote. I'm kind of a OneNote person. I'll take some notes in it that I refer back to, but it's more as a launching framework. What I do is I put them right in line in the appointment. So if I open the appointment, you got title and location and the invitees and everything. I put it right in the appointment. I just type it right in there, and I do bullet points or whatever, and I'll put right in there what I need to do.
What do your symbols mean?
So these go back to what is on that printout. So you got standardization, planning,
Okay,
automation. These are to show you that strategically, if you do some of these things, you're executing those functions in a practical way
okay,
inside the program.
that makes sense, I'm following you now.
Yeah, and there's a program now that I'm starting to learn. It's really cool by Microsoft, and there's a cool guy who works for Microsoft, and he puts out videos. It's called Power Automate, and you can get a desktop version of it, and you can teach it to do things. So things that you do repetitively, and I'm working with this with personality inventories. When I do the personality testing, you can automate it to do things. So the beauty is you can schedule it, you teach it to do something you want it to do. As long as you can standardize it, it can do it for you. You can schedule it to do it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, isn't that cool? I mean, that is high tech coming down within our grasp, like right to our desk. It's great.
Wow.
The other thing I started using, or you can use any other kind, I've seen people use different things. I started using Microsoft Booking. So I've got a little link in my email, and I see a lot of other people using links. Like I think one is Calendarly, or I can't even say it, but Calendly. Thank you. Yeah, it's a hard one. So that, something like that, where people can go ahead and book with you if they want, and they can actually see, they don't see your calendar details, but they'll see your calendar, and they can kind of book. So that saves time too. Let me see if I can demo some of these.
Hold on 1 second, please.
Okay.
This is for personal use, I'm not posting this one. So I can track my notes will make sense. This is block from the C. Thank you.
You are welcome. Let's see if I can do this real quick. I want to try to show you, get out of this if I can. I'm gonna bring up, I made a sample. It's over here, that's fine. Okay. So let me show you this first. Then we'll go to calendar. So I just made some, on one of my other email addresses here, I just made some items to show you. If I were to drag this over, let's see if this works. It's giving me alerts there. Now this is kind of hard to see on this screen, but here's an email that says, here's the info for our meeting this Friday. And it has, you can see here, it has an attachment in it. I can take that email side by side, and I can drag it over here to the calendar, wherever I want it. And then it's coming up over here. Let me pull this over so you can see it. Now it doesn't have the attachment in it yet, but it's already started to prepare.
From the email itself.
From the email itself.
Huh.
And it puts a subject.
The email itself and drag it there, and it will make it.
It will open up. What it does is it tells the program, hey, this person wants to make an appointment. Boom, launches an appointment. And then you just set the details and save the title or change the title, invite whoever, and close it.
And then I could change the info to that, here from our.
Yeah.
That is,
You said Calendly?
no, this is just on our.
This
own
is just for an
yeah.
email, Brett. If you do you can have your email open. Let me close this. I'll do it again. So let's say I made a fake email in here saying, here's the info for our meeting this Friday, right? And I'm like, I didn't have a meeting for Friday, but I remember they said it was at 3 or whatever, or 1 o'clock. I can now drag it over here to Monday. I drop it in the calendar window, and it automatically opens an appointment for me.
Does it pick the time, or do you have to put it in the time frame?
It'll take wherever I dropped it.
Because wherever you drop it.
So I dropped it at 1. Now that's okay though. Let's say I don't care. I know it's a week out. I can just drag it over. It'll open this, and I can drop down here to the week out and set whatever time I want. Cool, right? Now,
How do you know all of this?
I don't know. That's the weird part.
How do you have time to do all this?
I don't know. I learned it in line somehow. So I just learned these
Wow.
things. I run into technical people who are like, I didn't know that. I'm like, I didn't either, and I don't remember how I learned it. I'm just a quirky person, probably.
I feel bad for these people who weren't here today because, wow.
Yeah, so you can do that. Now, here's the key with that. You see that there's an attachment on here, right? it doesn't bring in the attachment. Now, I could still create the appointment. So let's say I want to make an appointment. I'll show you this. This is cool stuff too. You don't already know this. Let's say I want to make an appointment. Get this to work. I'm struggling a little bit with the screen. Let's say I want to make an appointment, but I also want that email in there, like I was talking about, so I can execute. I drag that email over into the appointment, and it puts the email here. So then when I go to do the meeting, I open the email, and I can review what was sent prior
That would be
to
nice.
or in the meeting. I can also do this. So let's say I want the email, or maybe I don't want the email. Maybe I want just the attachment. So if I have this attachment, sorry, that's so big. I go here, I drag the PDF in here and drop it.
Your headshot is fantastic, by the way.
Oh, Lisa did that.
I know
Casserole
she
headshot.
killed it.
She is amazing.
I think she's.
I told her she made me feel famous. So this is how you do this, and then you can close this. So it's a great tool. Close it without saving. And then we were talking about Outlook. We're talking about Outlook templates. Let me show you rules too, because I think we have rules in there.
Yeah, we got rules.
Yep. Let me pull this over. Struggling. There it goes. Oh, actually, I can do it with this spot. So let me just close this out. Oh, you want to see, if you haven't used delayed send, let me show that to you real fast. So it should be right here, it's under the 3 dots. You may find it. Oh, it is. Here's rules, so you can do it in line. Always move messages from, always move. I can do a create rule, and I can manage rules and alerts that I've created, but I can create a rule. Comes up there or over here. Yep. So you see this, there's all kinds of templates in here. And if I do advanced options, I can just do tons of, if a message has specific words, if it has a certain category, if it's marked as important or sensitive or anything like that, I can create all these rules based on the message and then send it to different places, like file it or delete
So do
it.
you not have them come to your inbox then?
Do I not have what?
Do they just automatically move out of your inbox to something else, or you see them first and then they move?
You can do both.
Okay.
You could have leaving it there and then making a copy and sending it to a folder. You can do all kinds of things. So there's flexibility that can match what you want to do. So that's rules. And then in here, there is I am struggling because it's a small screen. There is a way. There's a way to do a delayed send. We might have to look at it together after, but you can do a delayed send where that item I was talking about, you reply, but you do a delayed send and you tell it, don't go out this week, go out next Monday at 7 a.m. or go out next Monday at 8. I do that a lot because if I'm doing something at night, I don't want to impede on people's time. And I know a lot of people that we know in this group and others that are very responsive, but I want to get it done. So I just delay it and say, what's a decent business hour to send this out to be respectful and caring? So that's the delayed send. If you're not using add-ins, I recommend doing it. And what I mean by that is Zoom and Teams add-ins in your appointments. So if you are going to do a meeting, make sure that you've got the add-ins available. Pull this down. It's not working. Well, it's because the screen size is weird up here. In your appointment, if you have an icon for Zoom and you have an icon for MS Teams, those are add-ins. You can use those to plug in your Zoom links and your Zoom appointments right there at the same time you're doing your appointment if you're not already using them. If you don't have those add-ins, there's ways to get them. Okay. Yep, you could search for it, or you can have IT staff help with that. So definitely use add-ins.
There's a get add-ins. You fill those 3 dots.
You can do a get add-ins, yeah. Use the add-ins, they help a lot. They definitely help a lot. So this is, if you're a big calendar person, we talked about incorporating time. So I get this to maximize. We're a little behind, we started a little late, but so I want to show you something here. We talked about using symbolism. Before we do that, let me show you this. So here's that next 7 days. If I said, hey, give me the next 7 days, it does that. You can go over and you can drag across a set of dates and have it show those dates. So I could drag like this and say, hey, show me these dates.
Huh.
There's also, and I found this the other day, and I don't know why I wasn't using this. You can do a new meeting, and maybe I'm behind the times. Let's see, where was it? It's down here. It's down here. You right-click in your calendar, and you can say, go to date.
Okay.
Boy, would that help me. When I'm taking my kids for ortho appointments, my oldest, I'm always trying to race the gal at the desk because she's so fast. So I turn it into this competition. I try to race her on my phone, and she always beats me. So I think if I brought my computer, I can beat her next time. I'm going to try it. So, and then remember how I was talking about how cool it is, these open a new window as your friend. You saw it with email a second ago. But what I can do here too is I can right click on any of these icons like the calendar, and I can open another instance of the calendar.
That would be really helpful.
You can't see it here, but you can divide out when you use your window and your arrow key. And now they've made it where if you hover over parts of the window, it will give you this choice. Like, hey, how do you want to see this? So this is giving you that choice, side by side, or one big window on the side and two small on the right, or quadrants. But then you can put your calendar side by side. So I could have a week, I could skip a week, go to the next week, have them side by side. I could take an appointment from today and I could drag it over to that week and I'm done with it. I don't have to keep going back and forth, back and forth. It's a really great way to schedule.
Can't you just change the date on the top?
Yeah, but with this, what it does, remember how we were talking about planning to capacity? So if I'm looking at a week and I'm looking down, say at Friday, and I'm like, I am in trouble. Like I plan to execute this many items over this much time with these appointments, and I'm not gonna make it. So if I do an open new calendar, I can actually have those calendars side by side this week and next week. And then I'm not opening and scrolling back and forth. I'm actually looking at this week in totality, and I can actually look at a glance. Remember we talked about digital information? I can look and see how many appointments are actually there and where the free space is versus going back and forth.
Right.
And then I just take that appointment and drag it over into a free space. That's using digital cognitive psychology versus serial. Like serial, I'd be going back and forth, back and forth, versus just putting them side by side. Now, we talk about using symbolism. Murray, you mentioned this, like reviewing. So for instance, I use a lot of colors. Like this is the default color of this appointment. And if you're familiar with status, use status, right? So I've got back-end help now helping with some of my calendaring. When that person sees this, they know it's tentative. So they know, hey, that appointment's not confirmed. If I want to drop something there on Quinn's calendar, I can do it. If it's marked busy, like this is busy, see how it's solid? This is free. It's an all-day appointment, but it's free. It's there. Now, what I do with those is I just drag them down into appointments when I'm ready to execute on them and stretch them out for time, and then I'll mark them as busy. But using status is good. This is probably one of the biggest things that I think is a big deal, is I use color categories. And so I don't know if you have that yet set up in Outlook, but I mark things. And this is a great part of that feedback feature of refining. Anything I complete, I mark it a light gray, that completed. Yellow is my follow-up. So let's say I'm in a hurry. I sit down with Murray. This happens. I sit down with Murray in a meeting and I've got something. I'm like, I got to get out of here because I'm behind or whatever. I mark that appointment I was just in yellow. What that tells me when I go to look at my calendar is that something's back there that I've got to execute on. And I didn't take the time to put it in the future, you know? It's just there. I gotta go back. And I review my calendar morning and night, so I do the bookends. I do that. I have an in progress. So if I were to show you my actual calendar, it has training right now and it's orange because we're in progress. That's what we're doing right now. And that also lets other people know, like my back end who's helping with appointments, lets that person know that he's in progress on that. He's currently in that meeting executing. I use one called life circumstances because stuff happens. You know, my mom had cancer and when she was dying, this sounds morbid. My mom would laugh because she knew me so well. I put a life circumstances just so that I could get a feel for that was that part of my life where I had life circumstance. That's that unplanned, uncontrollable. right? And so in the future, now I have a category for that, where if something comes up and someone's sick or there's a trauma, I can go into that mode and it lowers my stress. And I can say, I got a life circumstance. So I can set it. I set priority. So most of my calendar is red, but priority is this is important. I intend with intensity to execute on this. I have very few of the default color in my calendar. I try not to have a lot of that because the point is like, should it even be on my calendar?
So I see how you can go ahead and edit those categories and name.
That's right. Yeah, let me go and see.
Where did you find that again?
You can right click on any appointment, is how I get to it. You can also go up here, and we'll do this, it's good because I want to show you, I do all categories. I'll show you this too. So I've got the priority. I now have one called strategic advancement. So I'm trying to set aside a day every week where I advance strategically. And that day is totally designed for deep thought, just reflection, executing on planning, populating my calendar with the things that matter that I'm going to get done. And then I also have an unplanned. This is a big one. Unplanned is I had an impromptu meeting, right? And so I'll have the meeting, I'll do the thing, I document that it was unplanned. When I get to the end of the week and I see a lot of that color, I say to myself, warning, danger, Will Robinson. I look and I say, okay, why was that unplanned? And is there a way that I could have predicted it? And is it likely to happen in the future? And if it is, I say, how do I turn that into the dark red where it's planned? Because I can't have that unplanned start to rule my life. Same thing with yellow. I've had weeks where I get to the week, most of the way my week looks is like a wave of gray. That's a good week. Everything's getting completed, marked down. I've gotten some weeks and I got a lot of yellow out here. I look and I say, you're not executing, Quinn. You got a lot of follow-ups, right? So you can create these, and when you do, you can create shortcut keys. So with me, I know these by heart. Like if I were to look at follow-up, Control F4, or in progress, Control F3, or completed is Control F5. Unplanned is Control F6. So when I tap on an appointment, I do the Control key, and it marks it. And I know exactly what that appointment means. So that any given moment, I can look at my calendar, and I have an accurate understanding of my capacity. How many people do you think actually are able to look at an instant at what they're doing with their execution method and tell you whether they can actually execute on something or not?
Very cool.
Yeah. And I've had people come back, not in this room, I've had other people come back and go, I'm sure you can get it done. And I go, no, I can't. I can't, not without sacrificing something else. I can tell by looking at my calendar what my capacity is. I can literally tell people I'm 2 weeks out, I'm 3 weeks out, and I'm telling the truth. So this is the key to this, is it gives you that digital capability to look at your schedule and know what you're doing. So, and then I put contents in, like I was talking about how I enter in contents, I put this one here just for you, Carrie.
Thank you.
So I've got this mock appointment down here, phone Carrie. I got to ask her about a meeting for next Wednesday. So I could drag that down to a time, mark it as busy. I can give myself, turn it into a reminder if I want to. So that's a key way to use your calendar to execute and do all these things we're talking about with that rasping. We bring that other list back up, and then we're getting close here, and we may just have to discuss the worksheet before we go. I think we touched on a lot of these. Noise, delayed send, using symbolism, all those things. Any questions or comments on that?
No, this is all very good stuff.
Yeah.
Incredibly good stuff.
The goal is,
It's gonna take me an hour to go through,
yeah,
and
I'll send this out.
yeah, probably spend a little bit of time each evening and
Yeah.
try to put it together.
And my guess is this, Brett. I'm probably in a 6 foot square box of the diamond field, and there's probably diamonds in this that I haven't even scratched on. And here's the key I really want to express. My method doesn't have to be your method, but use these features to cooperate with the way that you execute psychologically, right? If somebody comes to you and says, this is a great tool, you should use it, your first question should be, why should I use it? Why should I use it for me? Because I run into tools and I look at a piece of software, I'm like, this is awesome. And then later on I say to myself, how am I going to use that? That doesn't apply to me. And so I think, why would I spend the money? Why would it's not doing anything for me. Like our tools really ought to do something for us.
So I'm an old database guy, and I like databases over spreadsheets because I can design things to go multiple directions, right?
Yeah.
All the relationships.
Very dynamic.
Tables and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. But now spreadsheets that we use so much, spreadsheets have come a long ways, but still,
Yeah.
it's so manual in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where I've always been able to automate so many things in the database compared to spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
You're up until what, 5 or 6 years ago, the database that was included in Microsoft was very limited. It can only be so big.
Oh, access. Yeah. Access. Yeah.
Access, that's right.
Yeah.
It was so limited. With something like me that knew how to use it, you use everything, all of your you use all of your tables and stuff that were allowed, and then you're allowed up to 60,000 records.
And that's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you gotta build another database.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the horror of reaching that, right?
I don't think
Like,
it's that way
like-
anymore.
Yeah.
But that I was just using that database because it was free to use and stuff, but I always built stuff in DBase and
Yeah.
some of the other platforms. And it just for home use, you didn't have access to systems
Yeah.
because they were kind of expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember being in Dawson base years and years ago. So the application exercise is this, and maybe we'll blow through it and then I'll close out if that's okay with everybody, unless you want to do the application exercise. But it's this worksheet. So if you're looking at it, I'll walk you through it real quick in case you do it on your own. But these are characteristics. When you think about executing, don't think just about software. When you think about the way you execute, if you ask yourself these questions, if you answer no or question, put a start and an end date of when you're going to solve that. And so one would be, does it afford you flexibility for circumstances? So a lot of people go to execute and they set this rigid system and it doesn't work. Well, what happens when it doesn't work? We get discouraged, affects our emotions, we quit doing it, we quit using it. So if you take my calendar, for instance, life circumstances is one of those. It accommodates for things I can't control, but it still calculates and incorporates it into my planning and how to work with that emotionally and mentally. Does it address task conflict? So if you have things that are constantly conflicting or not working together, does your system of execution accommodate that? Does it figure out a way to solve what's conflicting with each other? If that makes sense. Calendars are great for that because they show you where you have 2 time frames that don't work. You can't be at 2 places at once, that kind of thing. Does it promote personal motivation? I think this is a big one. Does it help kind of gamify or create gamification? I like marking the colors off. There's a certain satisfaction to it. I feel like I've got something done. It keeps me doing it. It releases positive endorphins for me. I keep doing it. It's fun to mark it gray, right? On the flip side, it's very motivating to mark it yellow and go, oh, I'm losing the arcade game. I've got so much yellow. So make it fun. It's got to be motivating. Can you live it? That's another thing. You know, you could create a great system of executing, but if you can't live it, you got to discard it. If it doesn't work and operate with the way you work, you got to get rid of it. You know, Murray can have a great tool, and I know a guy who makes lists, but he reviews them faithfully, and it's just his mode. He's scheduled to review them and does execute. That doesn't work for me, but it works for some people. So make sure it works for you. Does it have an error correcting mechanism? You know how I have my unplanned? That's an error correcting mechanism. I look at it and go, something's not working here. I'm either not aware or I'm not controlling something. Does it use dependable technology and long-standing software? So you have dependable hardware, and is the software long-standing? Is that company going to be around? If you take the time to do this, will the company be around? Does it create daily persistent salience? Do you use it, and is it in a way that you see it every day? That's another key, because you can have a list and put it somewhere. Then if you come back to it 6 months later, you go, I totally forgot what's on the list. It's got to be something you can see all the time so it stays in your mind so that you behave against it. Does it capture what and why? Is it sufficient to record the information you need it to? And does it include the ability to measure time? And this is the important part. date and pace. So it's not just start and finish date, it's the actual space between and when you're going to execute. That tells you how much effort you're going to need for how much time. Does it give you visibility of your capacity to execute? Can you look at it and say, yes, Carrie, I can do that next Friday? Or do I just, sure. And then Friday comes, I go, Carrie, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do it. Things happened, right? Now that does happen sometimes, but not all the time when we're planning well. And does it have reporting and collaboration capability? And I really want to stress this about technology. It's okay to write. People like writing, but if you're writing, this is why I got away from writing. If I'm writing and then I'm putting it into something after, if it's not serving a mental process for me or it's causing some kind of value, I'm actually doing dual data entry. So that's what I call task reduction, right? The other thing with using technology is it makes it available anywhere at any point. And so I have this saying, anywhere, anytime. I take it with me because life can be purposeful and it can also be purposeless. I remember going to Disneyland with our kids when they were little, and a guy kind of like me showed up in a suit. And we were on vacation. He showed up in a suit. Obviously, he was coming after work or he was at a business convention. He's got his kids with him. And he steps into line, and the line had to be 5 deep, and there was about 4 wide, right? And a guy says, how long is this going to take? And he's about 4 or 5 back. And I leaned over to my wife and said, if he doesn't like waiting, he's come to the wrong place. And life is like that, right? We're going to go somewhere, we're going to wait. I take my tools with me because at any given moment, whether it's in the car, it's good for your emotions too. Because then you're not sitting there. Study on patience will show perceived wait time, perceived value, that causes negative emotion. So if you take it with you, you can work on it anywhere, anytime. And I say this, unless it's going to degrade the value of relationships. Right. So if you're somewhere where you shouldn't have it, the plan should be to leave it at home or leave it in the car or somewhere where you're supposed to be executing personally. You don't want to be doing the work, right? But otherwise, execute on it anywhere, and then plus anybody can get access to those things anywhere. You can work on it collaboratively, and it's instantly available. It's kind of crazy to think, in our technological world, if I wanted to share this with Carrie, like, hey, I'll be over in 20 minutes. I come over and I give it to her, like, here you go. How long do you need to work on it? 2 hours? Okay, I'll go back to where I am, and then I'll come back in another 2 hours. And I got it. But we kind of do that when we work with older technology.
I remember.
Yeah, we kind of do that. So that's just something to keep in mind with that. So when you go through the worksheet, it's just a reflective process. Answer the questions honestly to yourself. And then if you have a question mark or a I'm uncertain or a no, write down what you're going to do to resolve it. I'm going to investigate a software package, or I'm going to start using Outlook this way, or something of that nature. Q&A and comments. Any questions or comments or anything?
I was poking around because I use the Google Workspace G Suite, and I can't find any of those tools.
Really?
Simpler format. They may have an upgraded version of it, but at least the basic Workspace
Doesn't have those things.
I was trying to drag them in, so always reading on it doesn't.
And it doesn't do it.
It's got other things that I can't find.
Yeah, that work.
Some of that complexity.
That work well. Yeah.
Thank you for showing me that.
Yeah, certainly.
That was very helpful.
Good.
We have a lot of planning to do
Yeah.
and learning how to use all of it.
Yeah. So I just want to close with this. Be intense and impactful, right? Be intense in impactful ways. In your execution, be a tactician. Be somebody who's like tactical, who's like, I can do this better. I can do this faster. I can improve this. Be a pragmatist, right? Be a problem solver. If something's not working for you, kill it, crush it, attack it, go after it, right? Make changes. Don't live with it every day. There's a mental cost to procrastination and delay. And I've done this. I will have something on my calendar. I just did this we're getting solar. I just did this with a simple HOA form. And I just kick the can every day. Like it's just a little thing. I kick it. You know what happens when we do that? Even though it's still the same amount of effort, in our mind, it's not. In our mind, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. My mom used to say that my grandmother had this saying was, the dreading is worse than the doing. And I think there's a lot of truth to that psychologically. So don't let procrastination have its course on you. Be adaptable. Change the way you do things. Don't be afraid to change. Try new things. Something's not working. And then be ruthless. I mean, be intense. And as a psychologist, I say this on the flip side, don't do that to your people though. So if you're intensely executing, don't turn around and send an email that's as platonic and ruthless and cold and hard driving, to your people. Don't take that execution to your people. Take the time to craft a good, heartfelt email and those things. But when it comes to yourself, you can talk to yourself in ways that are still healthy. Like I'll say to myself, Quinn, get on it. Get up. Go take care of that. Stop. You need to win. You're going to win. Get up and go win. I'll say that to myself with my execution. But when it comes to people, be warm, be flexible, right? Exercise emotional intelligence. So don't confuse the execution with the people side of things. In the background, be ruthless. Get it done, right? But when you're with people, take the time to do the things that matter people-wise.
So you're just talking to one guy? I have two.
Oh, you have to. Yes.
One guy said,
Yeah. That's the one where I say, excuse me, we're arguing. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So we'll talk about some of this is really involved in the goals class that we're going to do in January. It gets much harder when you're talking about distal goals because you have to take this salience and this execution methodology, and you have to have the determination to work those goals out over time. That gets harder. More time, more space, more change, more problems with adapting, that kind of thing to reach goals.
So we have set up for the end of the year, we're all procrastinators. Resolution.
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't want to spoil it too much. I'll turn off the recording and I'll tell you how's that.
You do have.
I have something.
Oh.